I will go ahead and introduce Paul. It's a privilege to introduce Paul D. Casey. He has now been a professional speaker for over 28 years, giving 101 presentations in 2024, and he equips and coaches leaders and teams to spark breakthrough success. He has coached leaders for over 3,800 hours and is an ACC certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, as well as a master trainer and a member of the National Speakers Association. He was honored as Entrepreneur of the Year in the Tri-Cities in 2021. Through his company, Growing Forward Services, Paul has partnered with his corporate and individual clients to transform their vision, their habits, and their lives. He carries out his mission of adding value to people by contributing daily inspirational growth messages on local radio, writing for the Tri-Cities Journal of Business, social media posts, 5 books, and his Growing Forward newsletter. Also, he has inspired tens of thousands of individuals, leaders to grow forward through his soft skills seminar, team building offsite retreats, group and executive coaching, and as a keynote speaker. Paul is married to lovely Laura, has 2 young adult children named after state capitals, is owned by 2 puppies, and has lived in the Tri-Cities for over 25 years. For fun, he enjoys golfing and hiking and orange slices, and he reads over 40 books per year. That's pretty impressive. Helping you grow forward today, let's please welcome Paul Casey. Thank you for being here, Paul.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. It is a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for all you do for our communities in our state. I respect each and every one of you for how you're adding value as well. And I am privileged to be with you today talking about this topic of giving and receiving feedback constructively. And here's my family. There's the lovely Laura in the middle, and Austin and Cheyenne are the 2 state capitals, if you were wondering. If we would have had a third, it would have been Lincoln or Madison. The other ones really wouldn't have made sense. And there's one of our 2 puppies, our Lhasa Apso named Gizmo, and we have a little Shih Tzu named named Nugget. So we've got a Lhasa and a Shih Tzu, and you put those together and you get lots of, well, you know. So that's my funny joke to start with. And just had the privilege of helping many different companies here in the Northwest, and just great to be able to hopefully add some value to you today and your professional development. So, hey, let's start with this in the chat. If you don't mind being a chat participant today, we'll stay on mute for the duration of our webinar today, but I would love for you to stay engaged on the chat. What are your fears when giving feedback? Let's start with this one. So when you know you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, what is that anxiety or that fear that you have? You're getting ready to make that appointment or go into the room with that person. Let's just be vulnerable with each other for a moment and say, what are you afraid of, or what are you anxious about? Yes, thank you, Emily, for getting us started. Offending someone unintentionally. Yes. We're going to step on a landmine that you didn't know was there, right? And that person was triggered by it. What else when you have a little bit of fear when you're giving feedback to someone, like that corrective feedback? All right, unsure of how they will respond, feeling like I need to be ready for all outcomes, which of course is impossible to prepare for all of them, but feeling like I got to have it completely under control. Thank you. All right, how about the second one? Oh yeah, defensiveness, right? The inability to accept feedback without anger. Yeah. And what's interesting about that one, right, our trauma-informed care gets really has to be taken into consideration, right? Because all of a sudden these folks might think about you as the person that also gave them feedback before and did it in such a horrible way that now they put you in that same vein. All right, thanks for putting that down. Now I'll go to the opposite side, which is when you're receiving feedback from someone, someone is correcting you or saying, hey, may I give you some feedback? What goes through your mind when someone is about to give you feedback? And again, you could be just guttural, honest, it doesn't have to be the right answer to this. What goes through your mind when you're receiving feedback, even from someone you love, or it could be someone in the workplace. While you're putting that in the chat, let me read yeah, hearing what we don't want to. Reading between imaginary lines. That's often said. Yes, feeling shame of not doing it the right way, whatever that right way is, right? But like, oh, I didn't want to be confronted today. I must be wrong, and I like to feel wrong. Trying not to take it personally. Yeah, we're going to talk about that one today. It is an opportunity for growth. Way better posture, for sure. Let's see, Kirsten, the sandwich method. But yeah, so I think people are onto us with the sandwich method, right? Oh, okay. Thank you for your honesty in that. That's great. Let me do a little anecdote here just to kick us off. I'm going to spend 2/3 of our time together on giving feedback, some tips on that, and then the last half hour is going to be on receiving feedback graciously. And hopefully, if you're great at one, the other one will be your growth area today. And if you're good at this one, the other one will be the growth area. And let me start with this one. Picture yourself in a bowling alley all by yourself, ready to begin a bowling game. Everything seems fine, except when you release the ball for the first time, the lights go out over the pins. You hear the pins falling, but you can't see how many you knocked down. Looking around you, you see no one, so you yell out, hey, the lights are out over the pins and I can't see what I knocked down. You hear a voice from somewhere in the area of the pins. There are two standing. You shout, which two? The voice replies, don't bother me, just bowl again. Apparently, there's no other alternative. So you bowl again toward the pins you cannot see. You don't hear any pins fall. After a moment, the lights go on and you see the pins are set up again. So you say to yourself, oh, that's better. And you get ready for your second frame. As you release the ball, the lights over the pins go out again. And you yell, hey, how about putting the lights on or tell me what's going on? You hear the voice again say, please stop bothering me. I have enough to do back here. Keep bowling. I'll be back in 2 hours to tell you how you did. So let's pretend you continue to bowl under those conditions. At the end of the 2 hours, the voice says, I'm back. You say, how did I do? The voice replies, not too good. You say, what's my score? The voice says, I don't know, but it's terrible. Even if you were a good bowler, that would be no surprise. The reason is you were deprived of feedback. And even though it's just a cute story about a bowling game, it really is what happens in the workplace a lot, is that most people want more feedback to find out, am I doing well? Are there any ways I can improve? And oftentimes as leaders, we're too busy and we go like, yeah, just keep bowling, right? Just keep doing a good job. I'm glad I don't have to worry about you, but I got so much to do in my office, right? I got all this other stuff. Oh, I see a problem there that I probably should correct, but I don't have time. And then all of a sudden the performance appraisal time comes and we lower the boom and saying like, it's not too good. And the person's like, wait, what? Like you didn't bring up anything along the way. And then we surprised them. And so they were deprived of feedback. So that's why I think this topic is so vital and how I wanted to start it out. So let me just give you some general principles. If you want to take notes on the handout, if you like to fill in blanks to track along, I love to give handouts like that. Some general principles as we kick off is my definition of feedback. I've got it down to 2 words: calibrating expectations. Calibrating expectations. So there was, a situation and you thought you should be doing it this way. I thought you should be doing it a different way. So now we're going to have a feedback session to get on the same page, right? We are calibrating those expectations so we don't have any more unnecessary conflict. Second thing I know about feedback is that mastery requires feedback. I don't know any high performers that exist that don't continually focus on growth. And the way to get better is to have people say, like, oh, that there's one way you could take that to the next level. And ooh, that's not, you don't wear that really well, right? That's not going to help you in your career growth, or that's not going to be make you more influencing kind of person. And so we actually need those folks to help us. A third principle comes from a guy named Patrick Lencioni. You might have heard of the books Five Dysfunctions of a Team, The Advantage, The Motive. I really like anything by Patrick Lencioni, working genius. And he says that failing to hold someone accountable is ultimately an act of selfishness. And I was like, whoa, Pat, what are you talking about there? And he said, well, hear me out. There's nothing noble about withholding information that can help a person improve. And I'm like, okay, I'm on there. I'm on there with that. But how is it selfishness? He's like, well, it's selfishness because we're just afraid of the backlash, right? We're afraid of the discomfort in having the conversation. So we hold back, and that person continues to fail or make a mistake or just fumble the ball, right? And that's selfish because we're not helping that person improve when we know how to do that. I think it's a Lao Tzu quote where he says, from caring comes courage. Because I care about you, I'm going to have the courage to carefront you. I like that better than confront, but to carefront somebody because I care about you. Sigmund Freud said, how bold one gets when one is sure of being loved. So if I know you care about me and you're for me, I'm going to listen because I know you're not just trying to pull the rug out from under me. So I trust you and I'm going to listen. So we've got to create that environment, that psychological safety so that we can have this feedback. Another principle there on the screen is the sooner the better when it comes to feedback. I don't think anyone has ever said to me, you know, Paul, I just got on it too soon. It's almost funny to think about, right? Now, there is a personality style that does like hear something and then drags people in their office and says, we got to deal with this right now. But for most of us, we hang on to things a little too long. And then we're like, oh, but now they're on vacation, or now I'm on vacation, or now it's been too long since the incident happened. And so now it's awkward and then we just let it go and another layer builds up, where we don't give somebody feedback so that they can improve. So, on a continuum, if we had to score ourselves, a 10 would be someone who gets right on it, right? Like almost too soon. They just, like I said, drag people in their office. You hear it and you just deal with it right now. Like, I just want to give you feedback right now. A 1 is someone that probably never gives any feedback at all and hopes the problem just sort of goes away. They don't have to say anything. So in the chat, if you don't mind, would you give yourself a score on 1 to 10 on that continuum? So a 10 again is you deal with problems right away and you give feedback almost immediately. A 1 is like, not so much. Like it's really hard. You don't really like these conversations at all, and you hope it goes away. Give yourself a score on 1 to 10 on that of how you think you naturally feel or behave when it comes to giving feedback. Okay, let's see what scores you came up with. 5, 6, 7s, 5. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for weighing in. Lots of 6s and 7s, it looks like. Fantastic. Okay. So my goal for us today is that you move one notch up or down, as it seems appropriate, right, on this based on what you learned today. So you're either going to get bolder or you're going to pull back a little bit more because you need to think about it and prepare better for that conflict. So that's my goal, that we move the notch one way or the other. A few more general principles is without gossiping it to others who cannot help solve the problem, right? We know that that just takes our, recovery residents, it just takes it down. It just kills the whole mood when there's gossip. When people talk about people behind their back, it is so amazing how easy it is to talk about people and how hard it is to talk to people. But that's really the cultures that we want to create, is having this culture that we go to the person first and we don't talk about people behind their back. And then balance positive and negative feedback. Positive and negative feedback. Now, we're going to be talking mainly about corrective feedback when you have to have a difficult conversation today, but I would be remiss if I didn't really promote the idea of positive feedback. We need this more than ever since COVID. I just really think there's a malaise in the air, that in the workplaces, I get to coach a lot of people, and it just seems like there's this meh kind of attitude. There isn't this like hunger to excel and get to the next level. And I think people really need leaders, especially to put little coals on the fire of their enthusiasm, right? And bring it back to life. Now, I know it's everybody's own job to be in charge of your own motivation. Okay, I get that. I had a leader that said that, and that was the only conflict we ever got in was we debated that issue, right? But I said, like, what if we just honored everybody? Like, what if we gave more positive feedback, even though we're all in charge of our own motivation? He disagreed with me. I thought we should honor everybody because the research on this is a lot. I mean, you get this oxytocin release when you get a positive comment to you, and that makes you want to be part of a team, that makes you want to perform better. So I just think it would be great if we all took whatever we're doing now with positive feedback and times to it, right? Whatever you're doing. If you haven't done much lately, times to it. If you are already so good at this, times to it. And because of that, I think people are going to really want to follow your leadership. You could even take a positive feedback challenge. And I can't hold you accountable to this, but a 30-day challenge that you're going to give a positive comment to someone around you for 30 straight days and not break the streak. Just get a simple little form. I mean, I've got one I could send to you, but it's just 30 days in a row. You're going to give positive comment to someone on your team or in your circle of influence. You can move like a wristband from one to the other if you didn't want to use a chart. And if it's like 8:30 at night, and you're like, oh, I haven't done it yet. You still got to text someone a positive comment and just see what it does in you, because you'll be looking for more positives and what it does in the people around you. Most employees want more feedback. 60% of millennials say they want formal feedback every 1 to 3 months. But 38% of them say they only get it once a year with the performance appraisal. So if you're in that age group of like 20 to 40 today, I think you're a millennial. I don't know where we're at with the ages now of what a millennial is, but you could probably think like, yep, that is absolutely true. I want more feedback. Or if you don't feel that way, but some millennials want it every week. 42% said they want feedback every single week. And if they don't get it, the stats say that they respond on surveys of feeling ignored or disengaged. And I think that really is a correlation to how much feedback we get and that feeling of being ignored or engaged. But most people say that constructive feedback helps them. Now, here's a weird stat. I read this during COVID in an HR magazine that it said 53% of people want more feedback on their role. Okay. 48% want more feedback than they want more money. And I went like, oh, I don't know about that. It's like there's a lot of people jumping jobs for $1 an hour here. But whether you believe that stat or not, I think it's just showing us that people really do want more feedback. Even that 48% of this one person survey was reflecting, it's like, wow, they're craving it. All right, so leadership is mastering successful conversations. Really, that's one thing that leadership I know is mastering successful conversations. So let me give you some tips today on giving feedback, and then we'll head over to receiving feedback. So number one is to set the stage. Set the stage. In other words, don't wing it. When you have to give corrective feedback to someone, you want to give it a lot of thought. You don't want to be like, The Office's Michael Scott. Michael Scott said, sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way. That sounds like Michael Scott in The Office, doesn't he? Just opens his mouth and blah, blah, and he doesn't even know what he's doing. Not self-aware at all or socially aware. The words you choose will matter. And I was listening to a podcast last week where they said, and the words you use as a leader will linger. Not only will words matter, which I've heard a million times, but words linger. If you lead people, your voice is louder than the others because they're looking to you for how you feel about them. So your words will go on and on and on. That's why we have to be careful when we're just playing with an idea and going like, oh, I was thinking, we should double the amount of people that we serve. And they're like, wait, what? And then they start worrying. And you're like, no, I was just I was just thinking out loud. And you're like, they're thinking you're moving on that decision. So words linger. And that's why when you're giving feedback, we really have to think about that. Practice how you're going to say it, what you're going to say. I'm literally driving to work if I know I have to have a crucial conversation and I start thinking about how do I want to open the convo. Like, Jenny, the reason I brought you in here today was because I'm like, no, that sounds formal. That doesn't sound like me. Like rewind, so Jenny, I've made some observations and I just thought I'd make you aware of those. Okay, that sounds a little bit more like me. And I just practiced the opening phrases because I want it to feel genuine and caring and me, right? And not plastic and formal. So I would encourage you to practice at least getting into it. They call that the messy half minute, right? The first 30 seconds is the hardest. That's what we dread the most is getting into the convo. And then we're usually fine. Like we can just deal with it after that. So what do we do when we set the stage? We define our purpose. That's the blank there in your notes. Purpose and objective for providing the feedback. Can I clearly articulate this situation? Do I have all of the information? Because sometimes we're told about someone, and since we're the leader, we have to actually deliver the news because you've gotten a lot of complaints and you better do a lot of research, a little investigation before you bring this person in. Because the next point I've got here, what are the key points I want to communicate? Now, I'm not talking about worrying yourself sick, right? They call that PTSD, but it's pre-traumatic stress disorder. Worry is pre-traumatic stress disorder. That's when you work yourself up into a tizzy and lose sleep and, be cranky with the people you love around you because you're always worried. Like, if she says this, then I'm going to say this. And if he says this, I'm going to say this. And you can't predict that. It never goes down like that. So just think about the key points, the main ones, which I'll give you help with in a minute. What are some examples to back up your message? So they're going to ask anyways. If you get too vague with your feedback, they're going to be like, what do you mean by that? Right? And so you better be ready. If you don't have any examples that this feedback session is too vague, like, hey, Pedro, your attitude's slipping these days. And he's going to be like, what? What do you mean by that? Like, well, it just seems like you're not as happy. And it's like, you're out there on a limb with that. You got to say observable truth and share examples, or else probably should have kept that one inside until you had more to go on. What results do I want is another one. What positive outcomes do you want? Have you thought about that before going into a crucial conversation, even with someone in your household? Like at the end of this convo, I want this person to treat me more respectfully. At the end of this convo, I want them to be more on time. At the end of this conversation, I want them to understand what cleaning your room means for you parents that have kids still in the home, right? If you think about that at the beginning, you're probably going to orchestrate that conversation towards that goal. It's going to be sort of your true north to get the conversation to that end point. So, like, what's a 10 out of 10 look like if this conversation went wonderful? That would be another way of saying that. Consider your timing and location. What I mean by timing is sometimes people are going through a rough time, right? And you know that they just lost a loved one, right? Or they're recovering from a serious illness. And that's probably not the time to give them critical feedback. And now you might say, like, well, Paul, what if they're always in a bad mood? Well, that's another issue that we probably have to give feedback differently. But what I'm saying is being sensitive, your people, right? Your team. And it would be really great to hold back if you know that if their resistance is already low, right? And location is meaning always save face, always when you have to have these conversations, preserve their dignity and don't do it in the hallway, like a drive-by critical comment. No, that's going to make it a lot worse. And that person probably won't listen to the rest of your conversation. What else should we consider in this pre-work? How about their communication style? Now, if you know your team pretty well, you know the people around you pretty well, you probably know their personality style. I personally like the four animal styles. So these are the four animal styles: the lion, the otter, the golden retriever, and the beaver. If you want to go over to my website, it's a free thing right at the top. It says personality style, and it's just 5 minutes. You can give it to your whole team, and you can find out which of the four animal styles they are. If you've taken the disc, it's similar to that, or social styles, or the colors. A lot of these are variations on a theme. But the reason I say it's really good to know your team's personality is because you're going to approach them differently. I got my little stuffed animals here. I'm a trainer. I get to play with little toys, right? So we got the lion personality style. Okay. Lions are very direct and bold and like in your face kind of people, intense. And so, how are you going to approach this person with critical feedback? Probably very directly, right? They don't want to talk about their weekend first. They are moving on. They're going somewhere. And they want you to hit them between the eyes and say, like, all right. And they're either going to fight back with you or say, all right, message received, and boom, they're gone. Right. So that's the lions. The otter personalities are your fun-loving people. I love otters in the zoo, right? They're playing with each other. They're eating off their chest, you know. They're having a great time. Otters are always positive, sunshine, rainbow kind of people, right? Giving compliments, cute shoes, nice hair, you know, kind of people. How do you approach this person with critical feedback? Well, you might have to come in a little lighter, talk about the weekend, and then say, okay, so now I got something really serious I need to share with you, right? So that's the otter. The golden retriever. Oh, I used to have a golden retriever puppy, right? So these are the amiable people. They're good team players. They're introverts. They always follow the rules, very conscientious. They don't make a fuss, right? And how do you approach a golden retriever? Well, not right between the eyes. No, no, no. They might cry or shut down, you know, or run out of the room. You got to come in softer with your critical feedback, you know, to a golden retriever because they feel so deeply. They're usually empaths. And then we've got the beaver personality style, busy as a beaver. They're just precise people, right? Color coded. They love their planners. They are alphabetized. Everything is just so with them. So when you confront a beaver personality style, you got to have your data right. You better be able to say 3 times last week you came in at 8:07, right? And you know we're supposed to be here at 8. And because they're going to push back and go, Tuesday I was here at 8:12, you know, like that's not the point, right? But a Beaver personality will tit for tat with you on anything you bring up. And so it's really important to know the style of your people because you're going to custom treat them. I'll do probably another training someday with y'all on these styles because it's the most fun one to be able to share how quirky we all are, but to be more self-aware and also to custom treat other people. So think about that before you go into the conversation. Okay, so we've got timing, we've got our style. I put make sure you're in control of your emotions. Self-regulation is really important. If you want to sock it to them, probably not a good time, right? You're not through this, you know, processing it yourself. I've heard maybe you've heard the HALT acronym that we shouldn't engage with people when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And H and A become hangry. That's become a real thing, right? I need a snack. To get my blood sugar up. Lonely doesn't mean like you're a lonely person. It just means like, why am I the only one that cares right now about this, right? Keeping our mission and our vision going or whatever that is, honoring the rules that we've set up on honoring people. So those would be good times to halt and pull back. Remember, feedback is not a weapon. It is a gift. Some people use feedback as a weapon to beat on people, but feedback is actually just a gift that you give someone so that they can be aware, so they can make improvements. Probably a lot of you are Brene Brown fans. I don't know if you got any Brene Brown fans here. She actually has a vulnerability checklist on her website that she says, I know I'm ready to give feedback when. I'll just give you a couple of them. When I'm ready to sit next to you rather than across from you. That's so good, right? Sort of like the arm around mentality instead of like I'm shooting at you as my target. I'm ready to give feedback when I'm willing to put the problem in front of us rather than between us. So good. When I'm ready to listen, ask questions, and accept that I may not fully understand the issue. We don't know all the facts of what's going on in this person's head, why they did what they did, right? So we're going to find out. So that's on BreneBrown.com. I think she's got a download section that you can pull that off of. Just good stuff. We want to keep the people's best interests at heart from start to finish. Keep their best interests at heart from start to finish. John Maxwell used to say, they might hear your words, but they will feel your attitude. So they're going to go home to the person they love, or they're going to hang out with their friends later, and they're going to be like, I got a talking to today by my leader. And be like, what happened? Like, well, some mumbo jumbo, blah, 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 but I felt like they still cared about me. Or they'll say, like, and I felt this big, like I was reamed out. They're not going to remember all the actual words you said, but they will remember how you feel. And that's why it's really important to communicate at this best interest of the person level. Once you're with the person, you're going to convey a positive intent. Let me give you a way to get into the conversation that comes from a book. Here's if you wanted the QR code, there's the link to that free personality style. If you had your phone and wanted to just look at that, or there's the website at the bottom. But it's really good to know about everyone on your team or in your building, their style. The book is called Conflict Without Casualties. Conflict Without Casualties. And the author of the book, I think he also came up with the drama triangle, where there's the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. If you're ever in a drama with your family or other people, oftentimes you're taking one of those three roles. I think it's that guy who's the author. He came up with this Orpo thing. It sounds like a dog food, but it's where you start the conversation with, hey, the reason I'm getting us together today is to talk about the tension that we've been experiencing, in the building. And then you go right to resourceful. And I think by putting our heads together, we're going to come up with a solution to this, just in probably a few minutes. And then you keep going to persistent, and I don't think it's just going to be a today conversation. I think this is something that we're going to talk through with everybody in the group. And then you go to open. Is that cool? Some kind of phrase like, what are your thoughts? Or are we good with our agenda for today? It's got to be your voice, but just, I like sort of like, is that cool? Like, is that good? Can we continue? And he said if they have just a little bit of emotional intelligence, they're going to go with you on this journey of Orpo. And then bam, you're into the conversation. So open, resourceful, persistent, and then open. And the book is called Conflict Without Casualties. My favorite book on this topic, by the way, is Crucial Conversations. That's a classic that's been around a while. If you want to get better at this skill, Crucial Conversations. And so I'll give you a few book recommends today. Then briefly, you're going to share the situation of what you want to discuss. And then ask if the person is open to hearing your feedback. So there's that open piece right there. All right, so that is step one. Most of that was before you're even with the person. You're taking the time and effort it needs to set up for this conversation we're going to have. Let's go on to number two, or step two, which is describe the situation and the impact. Describe the situation and the impact. If you don't remember anything else I share with you today, you love it when speakers say that. Remember SBI. It's sort of like the FBI, but SBI, situation, behavior, impact. If we were all in a conference room together, I would have us all say this out loud a couple times. Situation, behavior, impact. Basically, this is how it goes. In the last three times that we've had a conversation, situation, behavior, you've rolled your eyes, folded your arms and slouched in your chair and shot at every one of my ideas. Impact. And because of that, all the people that were watching us in the conversation also started getting negative and shooting down the ideas as well. And we had no creativity to solve the problem. So the situation is sort of the frame. Was this in a coffee shop that this happened? Was this in our last staff meetings? Was this at the end of the day? The behavior is what they actually did that's observable, that people saw happen. And the impact is what was the consequences on you or on others. If you don't do any other preparation but SBI, you're going to be in pretty good shape to have the conversation. So let's break this down further. Share what went well if it's appropriate. If you have the otter or the golden retriever person, you probably want to lean positive, and then you're going to have to turn it and massage it to like, we've got something difficult to talk about. Describe what you observed. Please be specific and direct. And I know sometimes we sugarcoat things because we don't want to hurt feelings, but oftentimes we get ourselves in a mess when we start rambling. And just a funny story. When I was a leader, my first leadership position, um, I I was an elementary school principal at 26 years old, which is pretty young. And I had a teacher with a dress code violation, female teacher. I mean, nowadays we'd say like, don't go there. Like that would be not wise to go there. But back in the day, in the early 90s, I brought her in, and I think I got to confront her about this dress code violation. And I shot the breeze with her, and I sugarcoated, and then she left, out of the office, and I didn't even say the thing. Like I didn't even say it. And I just felt to myself like, Paul, you're a leader. You have to say the thing. You got, and so I had to bring her back in, which was very embarrassing to do that. So I've been growing in this area for a long time because my golden retriever-ness is like, I don't want to rock the boat with somebody and bring up something tense. So I've had to learn as a leader that it's, of course, for the best interest of everyone to do that. State the facts without judgment is your next point there in your notes. I don't think personally you can influence someone positively and judge them at the same time, right? If I'm trying to influence you positively and I'm judging you in my head, like that's going to ooze out of me. Like they're going to be able to pick up that vibe. I don't think if I'm accusing them, it's going to be with that tone of voice that it's going to be picked up well. It's almost like we have to maintain this objectivity as if we weren't related to the situation at all. And I know that's hard because you're the leader and you have to bring this up. But one author said it's like trying to pull apart the behavior from the issue. Or as a counselor here in my town says, like with marriage counseling, he like put the issue on a 3x5 card and put that on the coffee table, and we're going to only talk about that issue, right? Trying to stay objective. It's about the dirty socks you leave around the house, or about you not calling to say you're going to be late from work, right? It's the issue right there, and you're going to sort of separate the person from the issue. It's really difficult because the person did the issue, but your job is to keep it cool and not use high velocity language, stuff that would escalate the conversation. Let me ask you this over in the chat. What makes a conversation go like out of control? What escalates? What do people do or say in conversations that make it just totally blow up and inflames the whole thing? Would you put that in the chat? What's something that someone says or does in a conversation? Maybe you've done it, maybe you've been on the other side of it, but it just made the whole situation worse when people said it or did it. Go ahead and put that in the chat. What escalates a conversation? As you're typing, I think of like you bring 2 buckets of water or 2 buckets to the fire of the conflict, right? Bucket of water or a bucket of gasoline. What you're typing in the chat right now is gasoline that makes things blow up. And then there's the water things that go shh and help de-escalate the conversation. Let's see what you came up with here. The you statements. Yeah. Oh, you and pointing. The double bad, right? You feel like you sort of have to step back from them. An aggressive tone, you and always. Oh, Anna, you got 2 things there, the you statement and the that general statement of always. Condescending tones. And saying you shouldn't. So there's a you statement plus a guilt statement plus the tone. Yep, I think we've all had the same training here, right, Tom? The I statements versus the you statements. Thank you for typing those in there. How about the calm down or stop crying or relax? Oh, somebody says that to you, you're probably going to be like, all right, now it's on. Like here we go, or some kind of scoffing, like when someone talks or shaking their head, sort of like a parent, like shame on you, kind of a body language or with the voice. All of these make things worse and add velocity to the conversation and bring gasoline to the fire. So remember, it's how people they'll recall how they felt, not what you said, right? So that's why it's really important to keep it cool. Be brief and to the point. Be brief and to the point. People can only process so many items at once. So if you got like 5 or 6 things to say to this person, first of all, you probably haven't been keeping accounts short. Like you've been letting things store up. So that's on us, right? But even if you did, and because it was a short period of time, I would still group them. It's always best to have one issue and keep accounts short and just like make it a quick correction and then we're back together. But we don't want to store up issues. But if you have to group them, do that. One is always better. Also, then on the I part of this, state the impact of the behavior or the action on you and others. Again, only 1 or 2 significant consequences. Otherwise, people are going to say, like, you're attacking me. You ever had someone say that to you, like, stop attacking me, and you're like, I'm not attacking you. Like, you're wondering, like, what are you doing or saying that makes them think that? Because your tone is good, you have this helpful frame of mind, and they still say you're attacking. I think when people do that, often it's because of the piling on nature. If we say too many things to them that are corrective, they feel attacked, and so then they shout out, you're attacking me." So it could be just things like we're falling behind what we said we were going to do, or we need to meet these people's obligations. Just try to get to that thing. Like this is the standard we've all agreed upon here. Try to link it to an important goal that both you and them would say, like, yeah, yeah, that's what we're here for, or that's our standards that we've agreed upon. Please try to keep the focus on the behavior, not the person. Like I said, we're going to try to pull it apart and say, like, it's the tardiness that we're talking about. It's the disrespect. It's the messiness. Now, I know it's this person's disrespect and messiness and tardiness, but it's like we're both trying to solve this problem together. I like to say, tough on the problem, soft on the person. Be tough on the problem, soft on the person. It's almost like you're thinking like you're cool, but your attitude must go. Now you're not going to say that, right? Please don't quote me on that one. But that's sort of what we're saying. Like this person has incredible dignity and worth, and they always will. However, there's this one issue that we just have to bring above the line that's below the line right now. So we're highlighting the problem without crushing the person. At least that's best on our part. Now, we all have done things over time that have not been great when giving feedback. So here's some common mistakes. And think through, I'm going to ask you at the end of these 10, what's one that you fall into the trap of once in a while? Okay, first one is what we're just talking about now, where you judge the individual and not the action. Like they're like a bad person because they're doing this behavior instead of like they're a great person, but there's this one behavior. Number 2, the feedback is too vague, like saying you've got an attitude problem. And it's like, what does that mean? Number 3, the feedback speaks for others. Sometimes as leaders, if we're too golden retriever, we'll be like, everybody on the team says that you're on the struggle bus. Usually it's one person, and oftentimes it's just us. And we use this whole like everybody's saying this as a cop out instead of saying my expectation is this. Number 4 is the sandwich principle. Someone brought that one up already. I think people are onto us with the sandwich principle. I really do. It's like, you're great, you suck, you're great, right? What are people going to focus on? They're going to focus on like the negative thing anyways. So why don't we make this just about that and make the positive conversations just about that? But I know if you have an otter or golden, you might need to do the sandwich a little bit. One speaker calls it an open-faced sandwich, which is just, the one positive, and then we're going to get to the point of what we're, the meat of the issue of why we're having this conversation in the first place. So maybe the open-faced sandwich, if you still need to do it. How about feedback is exaggerated with generality? Somebody said earlier, always, never. You're the only one who struggles with this, right? Those kind of words are going to make people push back and say, not last Tuesday, and they're like, that's not the point. But we set ourselves up for it. We catastrophized the issue. How about number 6? Let's see, let's get to that next one. The feedback psychoanalyzes the motives behind the behavior. Now, some of you probably have a degree in counseling and some therapies, right? And you actually are qualified to psychoanalyze someone. The rest of us aren't, right? We've got our experience, but we sometimes bring this out at the wrong time. And we say, well, we know you're probably just doing this because you got some problems going on at home. Or you're probably doing this just to look good in the eyes of everybody else in the house, or whatever. And that's not our job. That's called pinning the motive on the person. I mean, pin the tail on the donkey. That was a fun game growing up. But pin the motive on the person, not too fun. I don't like it because you're not in my head and my heart. You don't know why I did this. So please don't do that to me. Number 7, the feedback goes on too long. This is where you get a little parental, like Charlie Brown's teacher, like wah, 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 wah. Number 8, the feedback contains an implied threat. Like, the people that do this, they don't live here anymore. They don't work here anymore. That's really, not that any of you would say that, I don't think, but either there is a consequence that's next or there isn't, but not just having this looming fear by having throwing out a threat. That's not good. Inappropriate humor is probably only for the otters among us. It's just hard to be serious. So they might throw a joke at the wrong time. And then the last one, the feedback is a question, not a statement. This is what I call leading the witness. Don't you think you should do better at this? Like, is that really a question? It's like an attorney grilling a witness. Like, isn't it a better thing if you were to like either make a statement or ask a question, but don't like muddle those two together, right? You're just sort of leading that witness to what you want them to say. Okay, would you be honest with me and tell me which of those 10 or a couple of them, you can either put the number or you could put the thing that you fall into the trap of once in a while? When you've given feedback to people, what do you do once in a while and you're like, oh, okay, I could do better at that one? I'll go back to the other slide here too. Again, the judging, the vague, the sandwich, the generalities. Okay. Oh, Anna, we do have a humor person. Are you an otter, Anna? The sandwiching, the too vague. Okay. Kira, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I asked to give the specifics, but wasn't prepared to give them. Okay. All right. We got another sandwich person. What else do you struggle with a little bit? Psychoanalyst analysis. Yep. All right. Another psych. Okay. 4 and 7. Yep. Going on too long. All right. Thanks for being self-aware of that, right? Because when we name it, we can deal with it. So that's awesome. All right, let me keep going. Step 3. Now you've said what you needed to say. Now it's time to ask for the other person to respond. So they're looking at you with the deer in the headlights. They might be putting their head down. They might start to cry. They might be loaded for bear and they're ready to fight back. They might just not say anything and they're sort of in shock. Because usually when when they woke up in the morning, they didn't think they were going to get feedback today. Most people, unless you had set up this appointment yesterday. So I would ask an open-ended question, like give them a little bit of a pause. Open-ended questions, as you know, start with a what or a how. We ask a lot of closed-ended questions, like, got that? It's like, that's going to shut it down. They'll either say yes or no, and you won't really know if they got that. So, like, maybe what's your view? What are your thoughts? How do you see things? We got to give them their day in court. We got to give them their chance to explain where they're coming from. And then we need to pause and let the person respond all the way to the end without interrupting. This is hard, especially if they fire back at you. Well, if you'd be a better leader, I wouldn't have to have this conversation in the first place. And your hackles go up and you're like, that is so not true. And if you did that, now you're done, right? Like you've lowered yourself to that situation. You're not behaving leader like anymore. So you got to let them get it all the way out. You can take notes if you want, right? If you just want to make sure that you're capturing this, listen attentively, listen calmly. Easier said than done, especially if their emotions are high. Pay attention to the other person's body language and their behaviors as they speak. What can you pick up in the chat? What can you pick up from someone from their body language? What can you assess just by intently focusing on them while they're talking or responding to what you just said? What could they be doing or speaking like? What can you pick up from them by staying keenly aware of what they're doing or saying? Yes, Emily, if they're angry or even paying attention to what you're saying, right? Like people sort of drift off, like, yeah, whatever. See if they're offended or defensive. Yes, those come off pretty visibly, unless it's really hard to read some people, right? The posture can give you, some of the don't care is the slouch, the arms folded. Um, or there's the jittery, or there's the almost like wanting to lunge for you. All those things can come out in posture. Yeah, Tom, not making eye contact, and they might feel a tad bit of shame because they've had to be confronted today, or like the person said earlier, like they're just not connecting with this, they're not owning the issue. So the eye contact is going away. A lot of things we can pick up. And so we need to then ask questions to clarify and learn. Clarify and learn. Stay curious to find out their perspective. It's the one thing you don't know. I mean, there might be a lot of things you don't know, but you definitely don't know their perspective until we ask. And here's a little rhyme that you can remember, especially when your hackles are going up. When furious, get curious. Isn't that good? When you feel like you want to go like, that is so not true, or we're talking about your behavior, not mine right now, and you just start getting really amped up, that's the chance to ask another question. Hey, can you give me another example of that? Or what do you think I could have done better in that situation that wouldn't get us to where we are today? Or something, right? Just ask a question. What it does is it buys you some emotional white space to be able to continue this conversation without lowering yourself to a place where you're going to regret. So when you're furious, get curious, ask another question, and then summarize the other person's key points to confirm that their intended message was received. When you summarize, it's the only way to show that you got what they gave. And it feels good to be gotten, right? When somebody gets what you're saying. When you say like, so it sounds like you're saying that you did say this, but you didn't say that. Is that right? And I'm like, yes, that is right. So guess what? You get a listening win. Yay. Because you picked up what they were laying down, right? If they say, that's not at all what I'm saying, you're still going to get a win here in a minute because then they're going to say what they meant to say, and you're going to have clarity. So you'll win either way when you test out a summary statement like, so what I hear you saying is, I'm sure many of you use that, and it's very, very helpful to see if you picked it up. Number 4, focus the discussion on solutions. Help connect the dots to the desired future. Help connect dots to a desired future. At some point, it becomes a spiral. You've been in these before, right? Where they just keep coming at it over and over, or maybe you keep coming at it over and over. I've been with people that I love who just keep circling and circling and circling. And at some point, you got to snap out of that and start thinking about the future, right? If this were going to happen again. Okay. So if the person agrees, they know what they're going to do differently, this is easy, right? You can affirm them, affirm the action, and say, like, go, great, yes, do exactly that next time this happens. If they agree, but they don't know what to change about themselves, draw out what you can think, what they think they can do. And then, because we want them to own this, right? So you can brainstorm, like, how do you think that would work out for you? I like to use that, even with youth and children, is to say, how do you think that's going to work out? Like, I could punch them in the nose. Like, yeah, how do you think that work out? Well, then I get suspended. Yeah, that's not going to work. Let's not do that. What else could we do, right? And you sort of brainstorm with them. If they are open to suggestions, great. You can offer possible ideas. You could share your expertise or experience, but only if it's appropriate. Remember, it's about them, right? If you take over the story right now you've made it about you. So you got to put your coaching hat back on afterward and say, like, so what do you think of that suggestion? That's just something that's worked for me in the past. Or I've found that when I get in these conundrums, this is what works for me. Those are ways. Maybe you can connect them to a mentor or a coach or resources or training. All these things we can do at these moments when their heart is soft and they feel like, okay, I do want help in this issue. Now, the trouble is when people don't think there is an issue, right? That's the sticky one. First of all, I would restate SBI, situation, behavior, impact. I might have to come at it from another angle, but I want to stay neutral and objective and stay calm because there still was consequences to this person's action, whether they own it or not. A lot of people want to play hot potato with you, right? They're gonna say, yeah, but so-and-so is doing the same thing, right? Or I only done that once, or why do you have this different standard for me than everybody else? Or hey, again, you're the bad leader. Like you should be the one in trouble for this, not me. And they'll play hot potato. And really what we want them to do is own the issue. So what happens if they don't still, if they still don't think there's a problem at this stage, what do you think you could do in the chat? What idea would you have if you've now said what you need to say and you've restated SBI? You have a great intention. You've delivered this with calmness. You have listed to their retort, right? What they have said back. You've taken good notes. You've given them suggestions, and they still don't own it. What could you do? Any ideas? A couple ideas. Let's see. I would bookmark the convo and ask if we could return to it the very near future. Love that, Carmen. Love it, love it. That's my number one answer that I agree with you on is yes. We need to call like a timeout and give everybody time to both think more on the situation, right? So that is a great thing to do is buy some time. Again, because they might be in shock and they're just blasting from the hip because they feel like a cornered cat, like, right there in the corner. And so they're lashing out. Everybody needs time to sleep on this. And definitely set that new time to talk in the near future. Yep. Francisco, you said trying to reframe and give them time. Love the reframe. That re-emphasizing the impact, right? That how can we say this a different way? Reframing is so great because they're not seeing it from that other perspective. Sometimes we have to go to the next level up, from us. Many of you are the top leader, so there is no other like place up. You're the final word. But others of you that might be more of the middle manager kind of a role, you might have to go to your supervisor or boss. What if they get defensive? What could you do? I would say, first of all, don't argue with them because then, again, there's no room for arguing in leadership. I would stay open to new information. I would acknowledge the concerns. I would agree where I can, right? I'm not against them, but I think we probably do need to take a break when you start to see defensiveness or start to see any kind of attack. We want to be turning the conversation forward. In fact, I really like this term, I think it's Marshall Goldsmith came up with this term called feed forward. So we're done with the feedback, right? Well, I don't even want to talk about that anymore. Like I got it out. I've told you the impact. Now we're going to turn like, okay, if this happens again, now we're going to go to feed forward. So we're going to turn this. What if they don't think they're able to make a change? Like, well, this is just me. I'm just this way. I'm always been this way. Sort of that fixed mindset. Like, I can't grow through this, right? I'm just going to get in trouble again. I would try to get a small step in the right direction. Like, I name my business Growing Forward because I really want to help people look forward about something within their control that they can do. Try to get agreement on that and then be their coach, be their trainer, be their support person to help them take that baby step in the right direction. And then I ask, what if something gets identified where you could have prevented the situation from happening or getting this bad? I would say definitely to apologize. We are not perfect leaders. We mess up. We might have held on to it for too long. I could say, I'm so sorry. I meant to share this with you last month, right? I've been sitting on this for too long because I just knew it might be an awkward conversation. And I'm sorry. Would you forgive me? I've had people go like, I've had a lot of responses to that, by the way. People say, like, yes, I forgive you. I've had people go like, no, this isn't about you. This is about me. Right. Thank you for that apology, but it's really not about that. I have all sorts of things. When I've apologized and humbled myself in front of somebody on my team, it really has taken a lot of that negative energy out of the room. And then I recommit to being more aware of this in the future. And then we turn, of course, back to them and what are they going to do? Set goals, agree on actions, document, and follow up. Again, HR will say if it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? Uh, with people on your team, you might be able to follow it up with an email, some written documentation of this conversation. We always think we're not going to need it, and then when it gets close to like a termination, then it's like, oh, we probably should have written down that incident that happened back in January. Now I don't remember what day it was and what actually was said. So I would encourage you to document these conversations, and then if you say you're going to follow up, do it. Like say, I want to follow up with you next week to see how things are going, see if it's going better. Well, you also want to get closer to a person you gave feedback to, because sometimes they feel like they've got the scarlet letter, right? They're like, they all hate me, or I'm a failure, or my leader doesn't like me anymore. And when you get close to them and just act your normal self with them, they'll realize like, oh, that was just one mistake that I made that has to be corrected. Thank the person for listening to your feedback. They had options, right? They could have stormed out. So thank them and then keep it confidential. Don't share this with anyone who doesn't need to know. Sometimes your leadership team, you might have to share this with, but most of the time we don't have to talk to too many other people about it. You could also self-evaluate how it went. How was your process? Did you do well? Or what would you have done differently next time this happens? Okay, so I'm going to transition now into receiving feedback, but let's pause right here. Would each one of you go to the chat? Would love to see everybody's comments. What is one takeaway that you already have from this hour on giving feedback constructively? What was a good reminder? Maybe it was a quote you liked. Maybe it's something you're just going to keep doing because you're good at this. What was just a good reminder that you want to remember past this training? Jody says, document, document, document. I know we don't like doing that, but it might save your bacon someday. Okay, Anna likes when furious, get curious. Good little rhyme. Don't pin the motive on the person. Not very fun. Take time to prepare for the convo instead of winging it. Remember the personality types. Yes. Shane, the last thing I said, yeah, self-evaluating afterward. How was my process? How did I do through this? Sitting beside versus across. Barbara, that is so good. I forgot to mention in there that that counselor I was telling you about. He said, wouldn't it be better to be on the same side of the couch solving this problem than on two different couches fighting against each other? And that's really what you said there, right? Is we're going to try to deal with this problem in front of us, but we're on the same side of the couch. Emily, all right, like SBI, because it's easy to remember. Thank you. Different approaches for different personalities. Yes. Yes. Thank you for putting that already in there. Let's go on to receiving feedback. Okay. You might be really good at this one, and then there's this receiving that's like, oh, I'm not as good on that one. I really get defensive, or I really don't like being pinned down, or I'm the one that feels like a cornered cat. And this might be in your personal life and not in your work life, right? I hope this goes both ways. But Stephen Covey said, don't ever consider yourself above feedback. Like, I don't do windows. Like, I don't deserve feedback. Yes, we all do, because we want to keep getting better. And here's something to remember, that you can still get an A plus in receiving feedback, even if a failure triggered the feedback. I'll say it again. You can still get an A plus in receiving feedback, even if you made a mistake that triggered the feedback. And the little prop that I give out usually at these seminars, if we're in person, is the Q-tip. The Q-tip. I stopped giving these away, especially during COVID, because these were jammed into our nose so many times. People were like, oh, I have a trauma response looking at a Q-tip. But Q-tip stands for quit taking it personally. Quit taking it personally. Isn't that good? This is a good reminder if you are easily offended, or you just think you're the worst person in the world with your self-critic, when someone has to correct you for a typo, or like you didn't handle that situation according to the book, and whatever that is, just remember, quit taking it personally. You're still okay, even if one of your behaviors might be problematic right now. You're still okay. You're awesome. This is diamond polishing time. That's what one leader calls it. I like that. You're a diamond, and then we're just polishing off some of those rough edges on it. And that's what feedback is when you're receiving it. Many of you probably know of the Johari window. You've seen this little window before. So we've got things known to you and not known to other, and known to others is the arena. This is where we live most of our life. In the opposite corner, we've got things not known to you or others. That's not hurting us because nobody knows it, right? So we don't have to worry about that one. Over here, we've got things known to ourselves but not known to others. That's called the facade. And that means like our hygiene habits in the bathroom, like we're not going to be TMI about that. How much money we have in the bank. Like we don't share everything about ourselves to others, and that's probably appropriate. The one though that we're focusing on here is this one up here called blind spots. Not known to you, but it is known to other people. Did you know that the average person has 3.4 blind spots? And you're like, Paul, not me. And I'm like, ha, that's why they call it a blind spot, right? You don't know you have these, right? We have to reduce blind spots with this thing called feedback. We have poor eyesight. I'll do a little play on words there, not eyesight, eyesight into ourselves, right? Other people have information on you that's invisible to you. We need people who will help flip the light switch on and what we need to see. Some companies do the 360 review, right? You get evaluated by your boss, your peers, and those your direct reports. And that's why they do it, is to get feedback anonymously from others around there. I think in a perfect world, we would give each other feedback using all these principles today, and we wouldn't need to do anything anonymously, right? Because we would be so current with each other and so accepting of feedback that we would all grow together, like rising tide lifts all boats, right? But oftentimes we have to do these anonymous surveys to get the real scoop of how people feel. We have to remember that constructive feedback comes from flawed sources. And you know what? We're all flawed. So we're doing the best we can when we even give feedback to each other. If you want to be a servant leader, you want feedback because they're eager to know whether their interactions with their people are helpful and effective. So we have to run towards the feedback. And the sooner you start getting it, the more time you have to pivot if you have to make a change. The question comes like, who decides in a feedback session if it's been successful? Is it the sender or is it the receiver? Who ultimately determines whether this feedback session has been successful? If you said it out loud and we couldn't hear you, it is receiver, right? The receiver. You could have delivered the feedback perfectly, right? With all the tips that I gave you earlier, and the person just goes, that's a bunch of baloney, and stormed out. Was it an effective feedback session? No, sadly. On your part, you did everything right, but that person didn't receive it well. And so now we still didn't land the plane on the situation. So when we're receiving feedback, to get better at receiving it, we need to ask for feedback from someone every day. Okay, maybe not every day, but more frequently than we do now. You could say to your workmate, someone in your office, like, "Hey, can you put your eyes on this email before I send it? I just want to see if my tone is good." Or was I really gruff with the person downstairs? Because I thought I might be a little too firm. And they would go like, "No, you're great. I would have been firmer." Or like, "Yeah, that was a little edgy." Now you're calibrating, right? Because you ran toward the feedback. So do it with people you love, and ask for more feedback on little things so that you take all that fear out of it. And then ask for the last 5%. What is that? I had an administrative assistant years ago. Her name was Patty. And after I delivered her performance appraisal, I closed my folder and she said, "All right, boss, give me the last 5%." And I'm like, "What's that?" And she said, that thing that you want to tell me, you didn't put it in writing, but you might be a little embarrassed to bring it up with me, but I need to hear it." And I was like, "Whoa, that's so mature." I didn't have anything else to share with her, but I get what she was saying. It's like that thing, like, well, when you click your pen throughout the whole meeting, people really get annoyed about that, you know? Or when you say like, all the time at the end of a sentence. I just think it detracts from your executive presence, that confidence that is coming across. Just that little thing. You're not going to put it in writing. You're just going to give them that extra tip. You know what? That might change their life. That little 5% thing. So if you're willing to be vulnerable, ask for the last 5% from people and see if you get something that is just like, wow, thank you. I know that was like scary for you to share that, but I appreciate it. 3 trigger reactions that block feedback from getting in. This comes from a gal named Sheila Heen, who wrote the book, Thank You for the Feedback. Another book recommend for you. She said, feedback will stop from getting in. First of all, she calls it truth if you don't believe the content of the feedback is accurate or helpful. If you're like, "No, that is baloney. There's no way, that's not even true. That's not even close to true. I do not do that." Then the feedback is not going to get in and change your life, right? The second one is relationship. If you don't trust the giver of the feedback, if you don't trust their credibility or that they have positive intent, you shut down and go like, "You're not doing this because you care about me." That's what you're saying in your head. And so it doesn't get in. Number 3, it's blocked for identity reasons. Because there's something broken in me, the story I'm telling myself is distorting the feedback. Because I feel really overwhelmed right now. And now you're talking to me about this, or I feel really threatened that you brought this up, or I'm ashamed that you had to confront me about this, or I'm just off balance in life. I've had 2 doctor appointments today, and my car has a flat tire, and so some in our identity, something about us is blocking the feedback from getting in. Can you think about the last time you didn't respond well to feedback from someone? Maybe it's in your family or at work. Was it one of these 3 things? Instead, we need to adopt a "this will make me better" posture. This will make me better. That's always better. We have to lower our shields. I don't know if there are any Star Trekky people here, but in Star Trek, you can put up these shields, which blocks these photon torpedoes from hitting. And when you have your shields up, you can't do certain things. Like you can't beam to another ship, a person, or have someone. I don't even know if you can fire your weapons. I can't remember if your shields are up. But there's certain things you can't do. You're not being your true, authentic self when you put your shield up and don't allow feedback to come in. So that's both real and on Star Trek. All right, here's some quick tips for you on how to receive feedback graciously. Number 1, focus on the content, not the person. Focus on the content, not the person. I would assume positive intent. Assume this person, API. There's another little acronym for API. Assume positive intent. What will that do if you assume positive intent? Go ahead and put that in the chat. If you go into this conversation, this person's like, I got some feedback for you, and you immediately assume positive intent. What's that going to do for the whole rest of the conversation? What do you think? How does it color the conversation if you assume positive intent? Yeah, you become curious. You start listening. You open your ears instead of your mouth, right? Less defensive. So good. Yeah, less of an attack. Yeah, these are great. Right, right. Staves off that anger. It keeps you open-minded. It makes you receptive. Yes, assuming positive intent has so many positive attributes. And like someone said, that open mind is going to allow you to accept it in the spirit it was intended. And you don't even know what the spirit was intended, but you're going to assume it was a good spirit, that it was to help you. And then look for the nugget of wisdom in the feedback. They might deliver it really poorly, right? And there'd be like half the things they said were wrong. But you know that in that whole thing that they said, there is one thing that you could grow at. Maybe it's your approachability or your tone or your timing. Listen for that. It's like chewing gum. You chew for the flavor and you spit out the rest, right? That's how you can think about when someone is delivering feedback to you and maybe it's wrong. Number two, listen calmly and attentively. You've now heard me say that on the giving and the receiving of feedback. We need to breathe. We need to tune in fully, demonstrate we're willing to listen. And you know what this does? This creates a psychologically safe environment for the person to keep telling you the feedback, right? Psychologically safe is what everybody wants at work and in every conversation we have. So we have to actually try to set this up by how we're responding to this feedback. We have to monitor our signals. Our signals are like the face that we have. Some people have that resting, you know what face, right? Looks like you're really mad at them. And that's just your resting face. And you have to be really conscious of that, especially like virtually. That one good thing about virtual is like we can see ourselves on camera and be like, oh, I look like I'm about to kill somebody. Like I gotta smile more, or like my arms are folded, like I'm just cold right now. But like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that when I'm receiving feedback because it'll look like I'm closed off to them. So we need to be thinking about the signals that we're putting off and managing our emotional reaction to that. Dr. Janice Spring said, as soon as you start to think about how this person has offended you, you say the word stop to yourself. I know that's so simple, but I've done this before when I've had spiral like thinking like, oh, if I don't get this client, then I'm not going to pay my bills. Then my wife's going to be mad at me. And then we're going to lose our house and I'm going to be on the street. And it's like, whoa, how did I just go from there to there? Right. I say to myself, stop. Come on, Paul, stop. All right. Got to snap out of that. Right. Number three, clarify the feedback. Here's another little ditty for you. Feel a feeling? Ask a question. It's sort of like when you're furious, get curious. If you feel a feeling, ask a question versus make a reaction, right? Sometimes when you feel a feeling, you make a reaction. This is way healthier, way more emotionally intelligent is if you feel a feeling, ask a question. Repeat back what you just heard. Say, is that right? Find out information that will help you understand your specific behavior or patterns and their impact on others. Because odds are they're not going to use SBI as well on you as you know how to do now on others. So you might have to ask for specific examples if they're not given. Also, be mindful of using an interrogating tone. Oftentimes, when I'm in a conference room or doing this seminar, I'll say the 6 words, what do you mean by that? And I'll say that in the angriest, most hateful way you can. People will be like, what do you mean by that? And they'll growl at each other and then they'll laugh because we're role playing, right? And then I'll say, now do it in the most hungry to learn from the most important mentor on the planet to you. And they'll be like, what do you mean by that? And their voice softens and their face softens. Their tone is way more inquisitive and less defensive. And it's just fascinating. It's the same 6 words, but one was an interrogating tone, like an attorney, and one was a hungry to learn tone. So think more question mark and less exclamation point to use end marks. Number 4, acknowledge the other person's concerns. Show you understand this person's perspective. You're going to close the loop on sender receiver, which now allows us to talk more. You can actually concur if you know something's true, like, yeah, I know I do that. Like, you're right. I said the wrong thing at that moment. Indicate your willingness to address the concern. If you are, say like, I'm going to get better at that. Like, no, I'm not going to do that ever again. Or I know next time it happens, I'm going to do this. And if you know right there, just out with it, right? That's going to make this so much easier for the person giving you the feedback. Number 5, this is the hardest one. Avoid defending or over explaining. What is defensiveness? Well, I know it's often rooted in fear. And here's the kicker. What you're most defensive about is the area needing the most growth. I'll say that again. The area you're most defensive about in life is the area that probably needs the most growth. So when we defend or we over explain, it should be an alarm bell for like, this is something I got to work on, right? The key is to be coachable. And to be coachable, we have to drop our defensiveness by reminding ourselves what really matters here. Here's the hardest thing I'm going to say in this whole seminar. If you can't accept bad news, you can't accept advice and feedback, you can't learn, you can't change, and you can't grow. You have just developed a fixed mindset, and there's no more growth for you because you are repelling it. It's hard to hear the truth if I'm busy defending myself. So where do I want to use my energy? In defending or in growing? I think most of us will go like, well, of course it's growth, right? But we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot when we defend. You can actually correct any inaccuracies in a non-defensive manner, like I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy, to use the Bob Marley song, right? Like I did do that, but I didn't do that. Just want to make that clear, right? I never said those words over that. And if needed, you could take a timeout because now you're the deer in the headlights. You're in shock and you want to sort out what comes out of your mouth before you say something that you're going to regret. A closed mouth gathers no foot. There's the parable for you on that one. Is what I'm about to say going to make the situation better, or should I keep it inside? And I even respect you more if you start lashing out and then you catch yourself. Like, no, no, not. I don't even know why you're talking about that. And you go like, all right, let me start over. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is, and then you get calm. I like that. I think that's called making a repair. And you're actually pulling something back because it's going to get really ugly if you continue to respond that way or react that way. Number 6 is to welcome suggestions. This is a development opportunity. I know you're rolling your eyes. It is. It's a development opportunity when someone gives you feedback. So focus on solutions for the future. You're going to stop yelling at the closed door and you're going to move toward the open door. People love to yell at closed doors, but like we can't go back through that. We're going to go to the open door over here and we're going to grow forward. Here's the best way I can illustrate this. If you've ever taken a ski lesson or had a golf pro give you a golf lesson, right? Or any kind of lesson. Did you get mad at your golf pro or your ski instructor who criticized your form? Of course not. Why not? Well, you're paying them to improve your form, right? So you're not going to yell at your golf instructor. They'll just walk off like, I'm not going to take this abuse, right? But no, you actually want them to critique your form. So why do we do this with people giving us feedback? Like we want them to make us better as leaders, right? So it's not your identity, it's your performance. You're still cool, remember? You're still awesome. You're still a person of worth. But there's this one thing over here that we still need to work on, okay? The best way I think to do this is ask for one thing of what you could do differently. My last client, right before this call, I suggested this to her. She's going to get feedback from her little team of 3. And I said, ask them for just one thing that she could do differently. If you keep it too open-ended, like what can I do better as a leader? Their mind goes blank and they're like, well, I don't hurt her feelings. I'm not gonna say anything. But if you ask for one thing, it really lasers it in like, well, when we approach you with something and you get that look on your face, she's like, what look? Yeah, that one. Like that makes us not want to approach you with any problems. Hey, she learned from that. That was great. It was just one thing. You're adopting the mindset. What this person is going to say is going to make me better. You could take notes where appropriate and move forward. Okay, a couple more and then we're done. Number 7, thank the person for sharing the feedback. It would have been easier for them to do nothing. It's really challenging to get people that you trust who are willing to shoot straight with you. So just say, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this, right? It shows that they cared enough to share their perceptions. They had alternatives. They could have gone over your head. They could have gossiped about it. They could have let you fail some more. But no, they talked to you about it. That's cool. This will positively reinforce and encourage others in your building to provide and receive feedback well. Like you're modeling this for everybody else. And then number 8, evaluate the feedback you received and decide how you might use it. If you've got some actions you want to take right away, like I said, say it. If you want to give further thought and consideration to the feedback, great. If you're more that beaver golden retriever style, you want to chew on it for a while, right? Because we need to have sort of a fascination with what's not working, not just what is working. Take ownership. That's what leaders do. Choose if and when to act. Weave it into your new routine. Maybe talk to a coach or a mentor and process this with them. Maybe you schedule a follow-up. Any of those things are good because how you act afterward is most important. You prove that you value their opinion by making a little change. And my last quote for you, the key to growing as a leader is to narrow the gap of how you see yourself and the gap of how you want to be seen. We all live in the gap, right? Narrow the gap by developing a deep self-awareness that comes from straight feedback and honest exploration of yourself, followed by a concerted effort to make changes. That's from Bill George. I am happy to send you my speaker notes that I shared or the slides or whatever you need. We can get that probably through Brianna or Sarah. Happy to send those to you so that you can pass this on to others. But let's wrap up with one more thing in the chat. What is your so what, now what? As we head out the door here, would you all put one more thing in the chat that you got either from this last section on receiving feedback graciously or just from the whole thing? What are you going to go do? Narrow the gap. Yes, Jody. Awesome. Give me the last 5%. Yeah, try that. See what happens. Yeah, simply get more feedback from my team. Yeah. The area you're the most offensive in is where you need the most growth. I know, I'm preaching at the choir on that one. Clarify and acknowledge their concerns. Yep. You probably have to help them form it sometimes because they don't deliver it always well. All right. Thanks all for being here today. I do have a little newsletter here if you want to get tips like these for free each month. I'm going to be doing a training on Monday on avoiding burnout, burning bright without burning out. If you'd like to join me for that or get the recording. And Sarah, turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was wonderful stuff. I hope you all enjoyed this webinar. Thank you for your time. Again, yes, Paul will be back on Monday for another webinar. So if you have not RSVP'd for that, please do so on our website. Again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Paul, for being here, and thank you for all of you. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
My pleasure.